Today we have Sue Gilad with us, two-time Grammy and five-time Tony Award-winning Broadway producer, passionate advocate for arts education, and leading voice in the theater community. Sue, you bring extraordinary stories to life on the world stages, like Moulin Rouge, The Outsiders, Buena Vista Social Club, Merrily We Roll Along, Funny Girls, Angels in America, and so many more. And you're also the founder of Broadway Custom, nurturing the next generation of theater professionals through training and mentorship, which we love. Talk to us about what it means to be a multiple award-winning Broadway producer. What does that mean?
Oh my God, that means nothing. But I'll tell you what's exciting to me, Stephanie. What's exciting is that people let me talk about theater all day long. I still
Mm.
can't quite believe that. I grew up very much a theater kid. My sister went to dance class, my big sister, so I went to dance class. But little known fact, they don't like it when you talk in dance class. So that was not the best environment for me. And they said, you should probably head over to musical theater. Those people never stop talking. And I was like, I found my tribe. And theater kids, we're weird, right? We're
Mm.
weird in a great way. And we stay weird until one of us becomes famous in television or film. And then all of a sudden, we're super cool. So my job, I feel like, is to give every kid the opportunity to become a theater kid. And because I grew up with a mom who loved musicals and took me to every kind of musicals, wildly age inappropriate musicals, I felt like it's a safe space for me. Just loved
Mm.
being in the dark, listening to stories, learning points of view that I hadn't been exposed to, developing empathy and caring and all the juicy stuff. I didn't know that there was anything that you could do in the theater other than be a performer when I was a
Mm.
kid because we didn't have the internet and we didn't have cell phones. Am I dating myself? So I just thought, okay, well, if I want a life in the theater, I guess that's what I should do.
Mm.
So I did the acting and singing and dancing thing, and I loved being in the room making it. I loved being in rehearsal. We'd come in for the first day, we'd all be strangers. And then 2 weeks later, there was not one person in the room that that you could do it without. Everyone was so important and integral to this piece, and we were at our most vulnerable. And then we get up on stage and we were supposed to do it 8 times a week. And for me, for some performers, they love finding new things and new experiences, and every show is different. Not me. I wanted to make the thing. I wanted to start in a room of emptiness and create this work of art.
Mm.
And after a good long time of performing with very, very talented actors, some of them started writing shows and said, listen, you are more bonkers for this theater thing than anybody I know. Do you think you could get the show up on its feet? Do you think you could produce this? Wow, sure. What is that? What does that mean? What do I have to do? So now these days, in addition to being a Broadway producer, I'm very vocal, or I try to be very vocal, letting people know that if you want a life in the theater, for every 10, 15 people you see on stage, for every one person you see on stage, there's another 10 to 15
Mm.
off stage, backstage, in offices, advertising, legal, general management. There are a million things you can do if you want a life in the theater. You don't need to be the person with the best high kick or the greatest high C coming out of your voice. So
Mm.
um, the accolades, the awards come out of doing great work. And I always tell everybody the show of a lifetime, the story of a lifetime comes around once a week. It's just whether or not you want to be the person who's going to develop that story and tell that story and why it's important now, why people need to hear this point of view right now.
Mm. I'm so fascinated. Talk to us a little bit about all the different things that a producer does. If you say that there is a story a week, how does it start? How does it progress? And, the finished product is that what we then see. And we hear about the awards and we can watch these incredible spectacles on stage. But what does it take to put this together?
It takes a village.
Mm.
That is, I think, the biggest challenge about music. I usually produce musicals. That's sort of where my heart beats. So musicals a very, very collaborative art form. You literally cannot do it alone. So therefore, it takes the most amount of time. So to get a show from first idea to musical on Broadway, somewhere between 8 and 10 years usually. So you have to make sure not only that you are going to love speaking about this, it's kind of like getting married, Stephanie. You know, you could just date, but when you choose something, it's you're going to be living with it for a long, long time. So make sure that you love it more than anything else that's in your life right now.
Mm.
So it begins by choosing the play. That is really the producer's job, is to choose the play or choose the musical. And when I'm not actively building something, I am out at readings and workshops. I'm reading as many scripts as I can. If you've worked with me before, I will always read your script. If not, we have a team that will read scripts and look for the next great story to be told. Once we land on a story that we really love, the producer's job is to build the team. So the writers are going to be very important, and it's going to take them a long time to write the thing. They'll write it sometimes in collaboration with the director. If it's a musical, the director will bring on a choreographer or choreographers in the case of The Outsiders, set designer, lighting designer, sound, costumes, projections. All that will happen very, very early on. And only much later we'll bring in the actors, first around a table with some pizza to hear how it sounds, and then with the all-important audiences. So for Broadway, we'll usually do a show out of town. So The Outsiders did its out-of-town tryout in La Jolla, California.
Mhm.
Moulin Rouge did its out-of-town tryout in Boston at the Emerson Colonial Theater. We try to find audiences that mirror New York or are similar in temperament and savviness to New York if we can. And then you open on Broadway and you really hope that you've done enough work that people are going to be excited and they're going to come once and they're going to come again and they're going to bring their friends and their family and they're going to come a million times. We see now at the Outsiders on Broadway, now that we're entering year 3, we see a lot of repeat offenders, people who will come back, you know, a teenager that will come with his mom. And
Mm.
as he's leaving the theater, he'll throw his arms around his mom, sobbing. He'll say, "We have to come back with dad." So dad will come back. Then maybe the uncle will come back. Then maybe the teenage cousins will come back. So we see a lot of repeating on the stage. And that's when you know something's really resonated with someone. So once you open on Broadway, it's sort of like, okay, now I share my baby with the world.
Mm.
And now you shift into marketing and sales mode. Who will care?
Mm.
Who's my core audience that I know will care about this? How do we grow exponentially from there so that the whole world or the world of Broadway, the theater goers really are talking about this and care about this, and it strikes a chord profoundly with them.
Yeah.
That's the life cycle. And then, if it's not too much to share, once we're on Broadway, we want to look at who in the rest of the world needs to see this. So for The Outsiders that opened on Broadway, oh my gosh, over 2 years ago now, we just launched our North American tour back in September, and we were in Cleveland this past weekend. We've been in Atlanta, St. Louis. We opened in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So the rest of the North American continent is starting to know The Outsiders. And then hopefully we can open in London and Australia. We'll have our first licensed production in Korea next summer. And we'll see how the world cares about us if they do. The Outsiders in particular is a very, very American story. Americans know it well because they read the book in middle school. Outside of the United States, we don't know too many people who know The Outsiders, so we'll see if they embrace it.
Yeah. Sue, so what do you feel is the magic to bringing these stories to life on stage?
I'll tell you my magic, okay, Stephanie, because if I knew all the magic, I would have only hits. Um, my magic is first, does it get me? Does it get me in my gut? Am I either screaming with laughter or sobbing uncontrollably? Maybe both in the same space of 2 hours if I'm lucky. Then, is this an evergreen story? It takes a long time to develop a show. So in 2 years, in 5 years, will this still be a story that resonates with people? And then the third thing is, will anybody else care? it can land with me beautifully. And there are lots of shows that I am crazy about that are not commercial, but they really impacted me positively. But I'm a commercial producer, so I want to look at the widest swath of audience that's going to respond to this and come back again and again. Um, Lately, we've been producing shows that are based on something you already know. So Moulin Rouge, based on the original Moulin Rouge in Paris, and then Moulin Rouge, the film with Nicole Kidman and Ewan McGregor. The Outsiders, based on the book by Susie Hinton, and also the very, very famous film that Francis Ford Coppola directed in the 80s that made stars out of Patrick Swayze, Ralph Macchio, Tom Cruise, Matt Dillon, Rob Lowe. I mean, everybody was in that movie.
Peppered, yeah.
Next year, we'll bring Prince's Purple Rain. That will open on Broadway, which is so exciting because Prince has legions of fans that cross every kind of demographic you've ever seen.
Yeah.
The out-of-town tryout for Purple Rain was in Minneapolis, Prince's hometown, and the audience was ready. They came all purpled out. They knew every lyric. They, walking into that show, already decided that they were going to have an amazing evening. So those nights are thrilling for me.
Sue, and you speak a lot about the transformative power that theater has to foster creativity and confidence and empathy. Talk to us about that for a second.
Well, I think we're very, very analog in a digital world, Stephanie. The more AI the world becomes, the more you can't trust your own eyes, what's in front of you on a screen. The more you're going to look for experiences like telling stories in the dark with real human beings around you, going through the journey with you, and real human beings in front of you. So I think that intimacy is actually going to be maybe the antidote to a declining society, if I'm not too grandiose about it. But one of the things I love to do, particularly with The Outsiders, we have a program on Broadway called the Stay Gold Project. And that allows students, high school students in New York City public schools that don't really normally have much funding for arts to come see The Outsiders. For many of those kids, those teens, it's their first show they've ever seen. And I really love to stand at the bottom of the mezzanine and watch them watch the show. And I can usually pick out two or three kids that were just turned into theater kids. And they didn't know, they didn't have access before. And they were the kids like me who were just not excited by sports. Like looking for a tribe, trying to find your people. Where are they? And if you don't, we have many, many challenges with funding in the United States right now. With arts funding, it's just being depleted. So
Everywhere.
everywhere. So if I can help give a kid access to a world that they didn't know existed, that can capture their imagination and let them find their place, it's a tender age being a teenager or a preteen. And if you don't fit into what everybody else is doing, and what everybody else is doing is pretty generic, or at least that was my experience, theater is very specific. The theater kids, we fit with each other. And if I can introduce our world to somebody who didn't know it existed, I'm all in on that. I'm addicted to that.
Yeah, I get it. What would you say are your main lessons after doing this for so many years?
Oh man. First of all, I think it's a huge privilege for me. I I wish I had gotten here faster. I wish I had known there was a position called producer that I could actually put on shows for a living, but I think there was a reason that I had to go through all the other hoops to get here. Um, but I would say first, follow what you love. I was always told that arts is not a career that's sustainable. You want something responsible, respectable. You want to be able to make a living. You want to be able to buy a house and have a family and all the things. But there are some people who they are arts kids and they aren't happy anywhere else. And that's me. And you know how I know that, Stephanie? Because all three of my poor kids, I shoved it down their faces. I was like, you are going to be theater kids. You are going to have everything that I was told was impossible. And my kids, very savvy, excellent critics, couldn't care less. Not their thing. They're not theater kids. So lessons. I have a producing partner. His name is Larry Rogowski. We met the way that I met all my greatest loves, which is, doing theater, of course.
Yeah.
So Larry and I have been friends for 30 years. And even if we are the only two people who show up for opening night of our show, we're going to have the best time. We celebrate our successes together, Stephanie. We celebrate our failures. Larry has this unbelievable strength of being able to identify in very, very early development, if we go to see a reading or a workshop, something that is just in the early nascent stages, Larry can say, here's the gem in this, here's where the story matters. And I think my skill is the opposite. When we're further along in development, I'm comfortable saying, this is a moment that actually should happen later in the show, or this happens twice, let's get rid of it.
Mm.
So we really balance each other out beautifully in terms of the creative process. But more than that, he's the most fun ever. I cannot wait to go to work if Larry's going to be there. So if you have the opportunity to find a great partner in your life, somebody who just makes it a joy every day, that's my secret sauce. That's what works for me.
Yeah. I love to hear that. I always think it's such an art form to have these type of partnerships in a work environment because they are sort of love stories, They're not your husband or your, boyfriend or whatever, but it is a love story and it can continue over a long period of time. So what do you think makes you so great together? Other than obviously you have different competences, you've worked that out.
Oh, that's such a good question. First of all, I just love him. I love being around him.
Mm,
You know how some people light up the room when they walk in and other people light up the
mm,
room when they leave? Larry's he's so fun. He's so great. He's so easygoing. Sometimes as a female, you'll have challenges in the room. People want to talk over you or mansplain you or
yeah.
find no worries. And the greatest thing about that is, and when someone is telling me how I need to run my business, I'm like, that is so wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Have you met Larry? Larry would like to meet you. And I can really, anything that I might not be getting through on, there he is, just being great.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've been talking about failures and challenges. What do you feel were those, pivotal sort of moments where you felt failures have taught you something or a challenge has really brought you forward?
I think, as you had mentioned earlier, when you start in the industry as an actor, no to me never means no, Stephanie. It just means
Mm,
not now, or you're
mm,
too tall, too short, don't fit the costume, you name it, whatever. Um, one of my mentors early on told me 20 auditions, one callback. 20 callbacks, one job. So don't make
mm,
it about landing this job at this moment.
mm,
Make it about going in there, build a strong relationship, send them the message that I'm going to show up on time. I'm going to be off book. I'm going to be responsible. I'm going to be respectful. I'm going to be a team leader in this space, right? So after hearing no and saying to myself, no problem, next in real life, in grown-up life, that serves you for absolutely everything. In fact, one of the reasons I think that actors are so fantastic at any other profession that they might fall into or choose to move on to is because no is a big problem for most people.
yeah.
But in our industry, most doors are closed. There are more people wanting the job than are going to get the job.
Mm,
So when I started producing and somebody said no to me, I was like, awesome, you're not the right person. Who is? Who do you know who's going to be the right person, who's going to give me the theater that I want, who's going to represent us as the general manager in the way that I want? And so just lots and lots of workarounds. So, of course, the biggest failure for me, Stephanie, is anytime when I work on a show and I put my blood and sweat and tears into it, and I think it's beautiful. It's like your child. It's your new beautiful, and then you share it with the world, and the world goes, we don't care, or
mm,
we hate this. And that statistically, that's going to happen more than not in the theater
mm.
because 80% of shows that open on Broadway will be considered a failure, a commercial
Wow.
failure by the time they close. So
Mm,
the deck is stacked against us
yeah.
right from the beginning. So you just have to know, I love this. I know there are other people who will love this, and you have to stay firm on what's important to me. Why do I feel like I need to tell this story right now? And then the minute Hal Prince said this, a very famous director, he said, the day after you open your show on Broadway, you had better be in rehearsal for your next show. Just keep it moving so that if they just poop all over you and the critics say this is horrible, then you have a reason to wake up the next day and start again with a new piece of art.
Yeah. Wow. That takes such resilience, doesn't it?
You get used to it after a while, and we on some level sort of anticipate not failure, but like uh, I would have never anticipated the level of success that we have seen
Mm.
with The Outsiders, that The Outsiders, it's a very gritty story. It's sort of Romeo and Juliet, West Side Story. They're rival gangs in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1967. I have literally nothing in common with this story, and yet this story resonates with me and millions of people around the
Mm.
country. So when The Outsiders opened on Broadway, and even my mom was like, "Oh, The Outsiders is going to be a happy musical. Ball change, kick." And it was something people hadn't seen on stage. Our director, Danya, she's a play director. This is the first time she'd ever directed a musical, Stephanie. And there was rain and mud and boys scrabbling for purchase and a giant rumble and blood everywhere. And literally, it stops the show. In a musical, you have to have a spectacle, you have to have an
Mm.
event. And this event is like nothing anyone has ever seen. And even though the reviews were mixed for The Outsiders, which is what we anticipated because it does elicit a very strong response, audiences told us that this for them was opening something locked away in their hearts. And that, I think, is what drove it towards the Tony Award for Best Musical, and the Tony Award for Best Direction, and for Best Lighting, and for Best Sound, and for people just coming in droves. And it's beyond my wildest fantasies, the way that audiences respond to The Outsiders. And I get life out of watching those audiences.
Mm. Yeah, I get that completely. So, what advice do you have for young people who are those theater people?
I have so much advice. Okay, so first, if you're lucky enough that there's theater in your community, be all in. If there is a theater program, usually the way a theater program starts, Stephanie, in America, is you have a music program. Most music programs are okay funded. Sometimes you'll have a drama program as well. Sometimes you'll have a dance program. If you don't already have all those mushed together into a musical that happens either in the fall or the spring or both, that's your assignment. Find the team, rally the team behind you to put on a school musical if you don't already have a school musical.
Yeah.
If you do have a school musical, lucky you, how involved can you be on stage, off stage, behind the scenes? In addition to being in the show, can you help with painting the sets? Can you be an associate choreographer, an assistant director? Can you be the person selling tickets door to door? Can you be the person who's like creating the advertising, right? So there are a million different ways that you as a young person can learn all the different elements to what goes into theater. Larry, my producing partner, was lucky enough to be a theater major in college, so he knows how to hang lights. And he knows the job of everyone in the theater. I was not lucky enough to be a theater major in college. I was an English major, so I'm good at stories, but I'm not good
Mm.
at the technical elements. So
Mm.
that's something that I'm still learning. The more you can learn about what every single person does on the journey to making a show have an audience in front of them, the more well equipped that you're going to be when it becomes community theater, non-union theater, professional theater, Broadway or West End or international theater. Um, I would also say that it's a brave new world with social media. So now what our casting teams are seeing is there used to be a thing called triple threat. Do you know what a triple threat is, Stephanie? Right. Why would you, right? A triple threat is someone who is talented in all three of the skills needed for musical theater: acting, singing, and dancing. Well, now, because there's TikTok, young kids see performers and they see their journeys, and now quadruple threat has become more common: acting, singing, dancing, and either you play an instrument
Mm.
or several, or you're a tumbler. You can do a tumbling pass across the stage, round off, back handspring, back tuck. which you'll see in a lot of Broadway musicals. So now that there are kids from every corner of the world that can see musicals on film, you can see there's a beautiful musical called Come From Away that you can see on Apple Plus. Of course, you can see Hamilton on Disney. If you go to YouTube, Legally Blonde has a beautiful MTV recorded a really beautiful version of Legally Blonde, the Broadway production. So you can watch what professionals are doing. You can emulate that and learn from that. If you don't have that program at school, start to learn which musicals speak to me and see if you can put one on yourself. Be scrappy. Put on your own show. It doesn't take much.
Yeah. Sue, so what what would you say matters to you most now, having had incredible success, and how do you feel you want to matter?
Hmm. I feel like I win when anybody sees a new show for the first time.
Mm,
I don't actually care which show you're going to see. I mean, of course, I would like it if you see my show because I have a relationship with it and I can speak to it and tell you the behind the scenes of what happened to get here. But whenever anybody comes to see a show, and it doesn't even have to be Broadway, Stephanie, anywhere, and they feel a little more kindness to somebody who is other, I gravitate towards stories about outsiders, about people who don't fit in the environment that was presented to them. So they need to go and find their own safe space, their own home. And I think if you listen to the outside world today, the world is a very difficult place. It is a
yeah,
very polarizing place. There's a very you versus me. People are very adversarial. The news is very adversarial.
yeah,
Theater is a collaborative art form. You simply cannot do it without all being on the same page, rolling in the same direction. And we all want the same thing.
yeah.
We want to be able to put on a production that we're going to be proud of.
Mm,
So I think if you need, if you're having a combative time in any part of your life, go hang out with theater people. Go try to
mm,
put on a play. Your heart's going to be warmer.
definitely. So let me think how I'm gonna ask that. S- So I understand you're doing it because it's everything to you, right? It's you. It's this creating that with other people that is this magical experience of being deeply connected in an immersive experience with others. What does it mean for you to win those big awards?
Well, it means that more people will have access
Mm,
to what it is that we created. More people will know about it, which is exciting. The other nice thing that happens is once our shows get recognition, then younger writers feel more emboldened to come find us and
mm,
say, would you be interested in reading something that I just wrote, maybe producing it? So it's a little bit easier now for us to find what are the stories we're going to be telling in 2, 5, 10 years. Um, and the more, I think, just the more you land with people, the more doors open to you in general. I, now that I've been doing this for a while, there are a lot of my mentors who move from theater into film and TV, mostly film. And the reason they do that, Stephanie, is because it's scalable. Our
yeah.
one of our biggest challenges in the theater is we have to find new bodies into the same seats every single night.
Mm,
Whereas once you have a film, it's on everybody's phone. Here, 7 billion people enjoy my work of art any time of day.
yeah.
My mentors have all said you're going to get tired of doing this theater thing because it is very time intensive. If my kids want to find me, I'm in a theater. But I have not lost that kid-like magic. So I would imagine that eventually one of my shows, it's likely that some of them will be adapted for films just so that they can get a wider audience and kids who don't have access to the theater can come to them on their computer or their
Yeah.
phone, which I'm actually a very, very big fan of that. And some people say that it will cannibalize your work on stage if people see it on screen. I think the opposite is true.
I
And we
agree.
saw that with Hamilton,
Yeah.
that Hamilton came out on Disney and the sales went up and the Broadway and the
Mm,
touring productions, which was very, very
exactly.
exciting. Yes,
Yeah.
so exciting.
Yeah.
And then the kids who never have a hope of getting to a professional production, well, The professional production will come to you.
You
So it's just, my big dream is that we are just as cool as sports and we get just as much funding as sports and we get just as much rabid, obsessive fandom as sports. That's a very tall order, Stephanie. I don't think I'm going to get that anytime soon, but a girl can dream, right?
definitely. Yeah, I love it. So what about your philanthropic work, Sue? How does that fit in and how important is it to you?
Um, so I'm involved with a couple of organizations that I love very much. There's an organization called Broadway Cares, Equity
Hmm.
Fights AIDS, that I first learned of when I just got to New York. And one of the things Broadway Cares is an umbrella organization that donates to over 400 organizations worldwide. It initially began as a response to the HIV and AIDS crisis in the late 80s, and many, many people in the theater community were affected. So initially, Broadway Cares and Equity Fights AIDS, which were two different organizations, pretty much doing the same thing, taking care of anybody who needed it health-wise. But of course, over the last decades, it has now grown to encompass over 400 organizations, so service organizations that include HIV medications and getting that medication to
Mm.
someone who needs it. And then there are women's initiative and housing initiatives, and it's a tremendous and inspiring range. So I got introduced to Broadway Care, Stephanie, because one of the fun things they do is every year before Thanksgiving and before Easter, Broadway Cares will stand outside every Broadway theater with these iconic red buckets and ask for donations for people, patrons coming out of the
Mm.
show. Of course, now that's become more sophisticated and there are QR codes and you can win posters with actors, autographs and playbills and meet and greets and walk-ons and all sorts of things. But I literally held that bucket and I held that bucket with someone who today is the executive director of Broadway Cares Equity Fights AIDS. So whenever there's somebody new to New York, young performer or young general manager, I say there is a next gen network at Broadway Cares, and it is all the people who are crazy about theater, and their offices are amazing. They have millions of posters and like all sorts of paraphernalia from the events that they've thrown, and those events are joyous and super inside Broadway. So I love everything that Broadway Cares does. And then there's another organization called Broadway for Arts Education.
Mhm.
And that really has my heart because Broadway for Arts Education will go into schools that have no arts funding. And in they'll come with a music director and a Broadway performer. And the kids will put on their own shows and they'll come in with music training. And their gala every year is like you bring a million tissues, Stephanie, because the kids are
Amazing.
up there with seasoned Broadway performers and
Mm.
they're just living their best moments. Their parents see them in a light they've never seen before. I mentioned the Stay Gold project at the Outsiders, where we have teenagers come in and see a show they've never seen before.
Yeah.
And my unrealistic, but I might as well tell you because how else is it going to get done? My unrealistic dream is that there's enough funding in the world for those students to come in with a parent figure because they go back home after school and they say, Mom, you will never believe. And the mom has no context for
Yeah.
what's why would so my fantasy, my wild and unlikely fantasy is that the families come to theater
Mm.
together.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
wild
that's a
dream.
dream. That's a dream worth exploring.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get around to that. I mean, I think there are so right now there are so few empty seats on Broadway. We're lucky, but you
Mm.
don't need Broadway to experience theater.
Yeah.
There's a woman in New York City who has gone to a different show every day for the last 20 years. There was an article about
Oh,
her.
wow.
And those shows included shows at LaGuardia High School, the Performing Arts High School, and Juilliard, the conservatory, and theaters in Brooklyn, and shows in people's living rooms. I love the scrappy nature of putting on theater. Just because I work in the most commercial element of the theater doesn't mean that everyone else needs to. So
Hmm.
there are a lot of ways to get started, and I want there to be more.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are your plans or your goals for the next years? I know you want to bring the outsiders to England, which I hope, and I feel if there's a lot of blood and gory things, the English might just love it.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, It's all the things. I call it an elemental show because it takes place in 1967 before there was anything electronic. Our director really used the rain, the wind, there's fire in the show, everything that's around you to really pull you back in time to Oklahoma in 1967. So my dream is to keep doing what I'm doing and to get more people involved and to care about it. We have challenges in the United States right now in that regional theaters, the kinds of theaters that develop shows before they go to Broadway and the West End, are closing. Many of them have been closing. And that is super hard to get back up again once it's done. So I will always encourage anyone, no matter where you are in the world, find the local theater and get a subscription so that you know that 5 times a year you're going to have a wonderful night hearing new stories and that that theater is sustained enough that they can stay open to tell those stories.
Are there any other messages, Sue, that you would like to impart on the listeners?
I mean, if you haven't tried an improv class, you should probably get there and see what shows up. You'll be surprised how much joy totally free self-expression can bring to you. There's a reason that theater people can just elicit feelings in a moment because it's a muscle that theater folks exercise. And there's a lot of really good work that's being done in the theater for humanity, not just on stage, but also off stage, because I think it engenders a sense of personal responsibility for your neighbor and doing good in the world. So if theater does good in the world, do more theater.
Sue, what could what are the takeaways for our listeners from your story, if you had to sum it up?
Please get involved. If there's anything about theater that has ever piqued your interest, go back to that place, see what that theater company is doing right now. Get involved yourself. If you like singing in the shower, then I bet there's a chorus somewhere that would welcome you. Or if you're dancing down the street, then maybe you should go take a dance class. And any way that you can support the arts. I like the arts that move, Stephanie. I like musical theater, but opera is having a heck of a time right now.
Mm.
Ballet, the symphonies, it's challenging for all of us to get younger audiences. I think especially challenging for the more early established of the arts. You know, if you're a young person, you'll probably have free access to many museums in your city. Go, see what shows up for you.
Thank you so much, Sue, for being so fabulous and for sharing your story and insights and your passion today.
My pleasure. We're going to go see a show together, right, Stephanie?
Definitely. I'm on. Prince, here we come.